Hi, I'm Phil Keisman. I teach in the Jerisha Dr. Beth Samuels High School program, and I want to talk a little bit about Parashat Toldot, which introduces Yaakov and the stories associated with him. Yaakov is one of the more exciting characters in Torah, and the reason is that he's a fully formed character. He has flaws. He twice tricks his family in this week's parsha in order to benefit himself. At the same time, Yaakov is also presented as a blameless participant, someone who is manipulated by family members and is involved in events that may be out of his control. His mother manipulates him, and his victims, his brother and his father, are not presented as the most sympathetic characters. And so it seems as though the stories about Yaakov have within them two seeds: the seed of Jacob the trickster, and the seed of Jacob the blameless, the manipulator, the one who will ultimately be a model for our behavior. In order to look at these two perspectives, and in order to see how the Torah has held on to both of them, I want to look more closely at the story of Yaakov tricking his father Yitzchak. Yaakov, hoping to get the blessing destined for his brother Esau, poses as Esav because his father's blind and is easy to trick. This is at his mother's behest, though, and so it's important to look at how Rivka is less than an ideal character herself. Jacob expresses his reservations about being used in the scheme because his father may find out and curse him. Rivka says that she will take any blame that is meant for Jacob. Vatomer lo imo alai klilaticha. So Rivka seems to paint the stakes as pretty low for Yaakov. He can go, he can trick, and if anything goes wrong, it's on her. But when something does go wrong, when Yitzchak finds out that Yaakov is Yaakov and Yaakov is not in fact Esav, Rivka switches her promise. She goes back on it, and in Psukim Mem Gimel to Mem Hey, she says, in fact, you should run away because of what you have done to your brother. So Rivka has twisted her words a little bit in order to get Yaakov to act in the way that she wants. Similarly, Esav, another character in our story, is portrayed in a less than ideal light via a narrative frame that opens and closes our story. Before our story, we're told briefly that Esav took a bride that displeased his mother and father greatly. And then at the end of our story, we're told that Rivka is still upset about this and has Yitzchak tell Yaakov that he needs to take a bride from the correct family. So here we see that Yaakov's behavior, or his marital behavior, is portrayed in a positive light as compared to his brother, and this frame may color our read of the trickery story such that Esav seems to be less than a blameless victim himself. So we have indications that Yaakov is a protagonist in the story and is in fact dealing with characters who are themselves flawed, but at the same time the story makes very clear that Jacob's behavior is not a paradigm for our own. There are parallels between this story and the story that we're going to see next week, in which Yaakov works for 7 years on behalf of a woman he loves, Rachel, and only to find out that he has instead been betrothed to Leah, and then must work another 7 years in order to marry Rachel. In that story, sister supplants sister. In this story, brother supplants brother. In that story, the father Lavan initiates, and in this story, the mother Rivka initiates. In that story, the trickery, the swap, happens at night, the first night of marriage, and is enabled by the darkness there, while in our story the swap of brothers is enabled by Yitzchak's blindness, or his darkness. And in both stories we see the shoresh Reish Mem Hey in the mouth of the tricked. Jacob is told by his father, "You have tricked me." And Jacob himself in the later story says to Lavan, "Why have you tricked me?" It seems clear that the Tanakh is doing what it often does, which is setting up a problematic behavior with a punishment, midah keneged midah, punishment that mimics the initial transgression. And so, from that perspective, Jacob is clearly at fault here. Both seeds exist in our story. Tradition will take those seeds and run with them, and we're going to see in Chazal many different portrayals of Jacob, but already in the time of Nevi'im Achronim we see a little bit of ambiguity into how we should relate to Jacob as a model for behavior. In Sefer Hosea, it seems clear that Jacob, all of the best parts of Jacob's personality are switched and we are invited to look at him as a negative character. V'riv l'Adonai im Yehuda v'livkod al Yaakov kedrachav k'ma'alav yashiv lo. God has an issue with Judah. He has noticed Jacob in his ways, and like his misdeeds, he will be repaid, or he will repay him. Bebeten akaved echav uve'ano sara et Elohim. In womb, he tricked and supplanted his brother, and in his maturity, he fought against God. Two things are going on in this pasuk that subvert our understanding of Jacob. The Shoresh Ayin Kuf Bet no longer refers to ankle, but now refers to a different use of the word, which is supplant through trickery. It shows up all through Tanakh. And also, Sarah, Sin Resh He, which is the root of Yisrael, instead of Saraim, which we will see in Parashat Vayeshev, we now see Saraet, which seems to portray Yaakov as a much more aggressive participant in the famous fight with the Ish on the Yabok River. So for Hosea, Yaakov is not a model of behavior, but for Yeshayahu he is. Yeshayahu says, Ata, Ko amar Adonai bro'echa Yaakov v'yotzerecha Yisrael, al tira ki galaticha, karati b'shimcha li ata. Now, says God, your creator Jacob, your fashioner Israel, do not be afraid, for I have redeemed you. I have called in your name, you are mine. So here, Jacob, or Israel by his other name, is a stand-in for the Jewish people, and there's unambiguous acceptance from God of the Jewish people. So our tradition seems to be able to hold two aspects of Jacob's personality, the good and the bad. And I think that this model can serve us well. That we also have within us possibilities for all sorts of behavior. Sometimes on the same day, the same person can act in ways that seem mutually exclusive. And it's important when we reflect on our own behavior that we don't just ignore the parts of us that are less than ideal. And that we don't just focus on the good that we have, but that we also struggle with the parts of us that are worth examining, changing, and developing as we grow. So just as tradition has accepted all of Jacob, I hope that we can all accept all of what we have to offer in ourselves, and Shabbat Shalom.